we're going to have one final and extremely important speaker. That's about the issue of Muslim political prisoners in the United States, of which there are many. And Mel Underbaki, who's going to be joining me in a second, longtime friend, is going to be addressing this critical issue that's affected so many in the community. So give it up for Mel. For Civil Freedoms, an extremely important and excellent group.
Okay. Everybody hear me? First, our basic mission for the Coalition for Civil Freedoms is to advocate for the rights of political prisoners who were targeted in the war on terror. So I'm going to start with the beginning and tell you how we got our start, and it's going to be from my point of view. There's lots of different points of view with this one. But my first exposure to all of this was in Tampa, Florida, when one of my colleagues at the University of South Florida was charged with terrorism. And this was Dr. Samuel Arian, who was tenured, highly respected, award-winning, etc. But he was also a political activist working quite effectively for the rights of Palestinians. So Friends of Human Rights was formed to advocate for him at that time. He was in pre-trial in solitary confinement for 2.5 years. So almost every day, his wife Nala and I took a nice walk along the Hillsborough River, and she told me what was happening to him in prison, and I could not believe it. I was shocked. So this was all new to me then, and this is before he had a trial, and things like he was strip searched every time he entered or left his cell. His treatment was unbelievable. And the 6-month trial was equally shocking. I was there every day, and it was really a theater of the absurd. And if it hadn't been real, it would have been funny. It was that absurd. And the jury agreed, and they were unanimous that Sammy was not a terrorist. But because 2 of the jurors did not want to completely acquit him, the government was able to continue its vendetta against him, and it was 7 more years before he attained his freedom. So there was a Norwegian filmmaker, Lene Halvorsen, made an excellent film about the trial called USA versus Al-Arian. And my partner and I took this film around the country, and in the process we learned that Sammy was not the only one that this was happening to. In every town we met people who had a loved one who had been unjustly imprisoned. So at about the same time, the people who now make up our legal team, Steve Downs and Kathy Manley, were involved in another very unjust case against Yassin Aref, who was an imam in Albany, New York. He and his co-defendant, Mohammed Hossein, were entrapped by an FBI informant in a fabricated case. And Project Salam was formed there to advocate for these 2 men. And Steve and Kathy also started investigating, and they were also struck by the large number of unjust arrests around the country in terrorism cases. So in 2010, Sammy was on house arrest. He brought his Friends of Human Rights, Project Salam, and 16 other organizations together in his daughter's apartment, where she had custody of her father, and the Coalition for Civil Freedoms was born. And at the time, it was called the National Coalition to Protect Civil Freedoms. So after 9/11, the FBI was tasked with preventing the next terror attack. So they started looking for terrorists everywhere. And one of their early targets were influential people, particularly those who advocated for Palestine. So an example of that type of case was Sammy's case, and the hope was to silence him. Another similar case was the Holy Land Five. So the Holy Land Foundation was the largest Islamic charity in the United States at the time, and some of their charity went to help people in Palestine. And so, of course, that had to be stopped. And it took 2 trials, but they managed to convict them. And the 2 co-founders, Hassan Al-Ashi and Shukri Abu Bakr, who were 50 years old at the time, were both convicted and sentenced to 65 years in prison. So this amounts to a life sentence, and these are 2 very good men taken out of commission for us. So it turned out that these early terrorists were very hard to find, so the FBI had to get creative. One popular way to find terrorists is to send informants into mosques to befriend vulnerable people usually young men, and goad them into saying something stupid and recording these things to play to a jury later on. So there were several cases in Tampa early on. One of those was a classic entrapment case. Sammy Osmacock was a young man who was mentally ill and very vulnerable. So informants sent by the FBI befriended him, got him a job, gave him money, bought him food, and they started goading him into a terrorist plot. So these informants planned everything, and Sammy did nothing. But they put a AR-15 into his hands, and they filmed him swearing allegiance to Al-Qaeda. They showed that film to the jury, and the jury convicted him. So he was sentenced to 41 years and for speech, basically. Yeah. And Sammy's immigrant family, who had been doing very well with a successful bakery and a house, but they lost everything in paying for the lawyer. And I think the last 2 points I wanted to make, this ongoing war and terror kicked into high gear after 9/11. Now the genocide in Gaza is providing another rationale for depriving people of their civil rights. As FBI Director Ray recently said that this will increase domestic radicalization for years to come, that our biggest threat is homegrown terrorists, and by that we meant Americans. So now they're looking for terrorists on college campuses, among the people who are opposed to genocide, on the streets, and when people, again, for protesting. And informants are continuing to infiltrate mosques looking for idealistic but easily influenced young people in order to manufacture even more terrorist plots. So our coalition has a database with over 1,000 cases like this. Entrapment and preemptive prosecution of very vulnerable and naive people turned out to be an easy way for the FBI to look like they were doing something to keep us safe. But of course, none of these people are dangerous, and it's not keeping us safe. The true danger is the loss of civil liberties. And most of the cases in our database involve Muslims, but not all of them do. We are all at risk. So CCF works to advocate for and support these political prisoners and their families. So in addition to our ongoing support, we hold an in-person family conference once a year. Where we bring the families of these political prisoners together. We speak at events like this one to educate people about what's going on, and we work with the families to hold other events. We recently just finished a Ramadan campaign where we send gifts of $100 to over 200 prisoners so they can buy special things for Ramadan. And we are beginning a prisoner sponsorship program where we're going to send needy prisoners financial support every month, not just Ramadan. And also our legal team has been successful. I have to brag about our legal team. Kathy Mann is our legal director. They've been successful in getting people out of prison on compassionate release. The most famous of this was a Newburgh 4. But when the first time it happened, we were surprised. We didn't really think these terrorists would ever get out of prison. But probably low on time, I don't really know. But I hope you stop by our table if you haven't already to learn more about us and what we do. We're also on Facebook and on YouTube, and we have a website which is currently being improved, but we do have a basic website up at civilfreedoms.org. We have a weekly news digest, which we can find out what we're doing there. Sometimes we put action alerts in there when somebody's going to trial. If you ever have a trial near you, go to it, you'll be surprised, and it's also showing support for the people. It's really helpful. And if you're an attorney, we're particularly looking for volunteer attorneys to help with this compassionate release program we're doing. And this one other thing in closing, I heard somebody say yesterday that the FBI knocked on the door, and this, you probably all know what to do. If the FBI knocks on your door, don't open your door, don't let them in, don't talk to them. Ask for their card and tell them your lawyer will call them. Yeah.
So many years pushing back against so many cases of repression. It's actually truly a remarkable story. I recall one time that I was down there in Tampa, and I was part of an event with Mel, and there's a lot of people there. A lot of Arabs and Muslims were there. It was interesting. I went around and talked to people. I'm an outgoing person. Every single person at that event had been talked to. The FBI had been to their doors. Every single person at that event. And that says something about the level of repression in Tampa and in the United States as a whole. So again, give it up for all the panelists. Of all those who are under attack. So when our movement is under attack, what do?